Welcome to the Early Educator Podcast, where we talk about everything that you need when it comes to growing your business, overcoming obstacles, and making an impact on not only the children in your care, but to your community and your family. My name is Blake, and today with me we have Ashley. Ashley, thank you so much for coming with us today on the podcast.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah. So I guess to start out, Ashley, who are you? What do you do? And all that jazz.
Yeah. So my name's Ashley Clotfelter. I'm a graduate of University of Tennessee. I'm currently the project director for a program called Tennessee ACEs through Metro Drug Coalition, but I also work as an adjunct professor at the University of Tennessee College of Social Work. So I stay very busy.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. So I guess just we can go ahead and hop in a couple of questions. I know before when we talked about like creating like safe and supportive places for children.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so what does a truly safe space look like for a child, like yes, physically, but also like emotionally?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Absolutely. So when we think about children, they're sponges. They pick up on everything, and they really rely on us. And so the spaces we provide, positive or negative, really impact their growth. So a space, whether, like you said, physical or just from like a caregiver providing that space, can look like a calming environment. So something that I find really important when working with children and working with parents and talking about children is when a child is upset, when you come down to their level and make eye contact with them, there's an immediate shift in their emotions and their behavior because you're meeting them at their level. And I just see a calming. And when we bring the emotional level down, that helps bring them down too. Because whenever they're elevated, if we're elevated too, it just keeps going back and forth. So in creating a calm environment for children in a safe space is just creating a way for a child to feel protected. And that cortisol level from the fear, any kind of anxiety, all of that coming down. And that impacts the child's biology as well, which I know we'll kind of talk a little bit about that later, but impacts their biology, impacts everything. So yeah,
very true. So I think it's one thing that with educators or anybody, we don't really know what children goes through and outside of the facility,
right?
And so what are simple ways where if an educator maybe notices they may experience something outside of the home they shouldn't or whatever, like what are ways that educators can use to help children feel more like secure and more seen?
Absolutely. I think a big thing for educators and really adults, anyone working with children, is that if there's behavior, whether it's unruly behavior or disruptive behavior, typically there's something else going on. It is very easy to just say, oh, that child's unruly, that child's disruptive, get them out of my class, or I can't deal with them. They're a bad kid. But we need to look deeper than that because often there might be something else going on at home. So I think that the biggest thing is if you do have a child that's dysregulated or disruptive, is to first calm yourself, because it's going to be easy, especially if you're working with multiple children in a classroom, to just kind of get centered, take a breath, come to their level, and then talk with them on their level. And especially I feel younger kids and educators can speak to this. They'll tell you everything, whether you want to know it or not. Oftentimes the younger ones will tell all, and especially if it's with an adult or an educator they trust. And so I think finding the root of the behavior is very important. And it also like humanizes the child in that instead of seeing the behavior, you're seeing the child. So it's that child first, that person first perspective. Something I like to talk about in social work is systems theory. So systems theory is the idea, we also call it person and environment. So you have a person, but there's so many other impacts surrounding their lives. So you've got the child, but you've got the family, the friends, the community, the school. So a child is not just the child, it's so many other factors as well. So when we take those into consideration, it really impacts how we work with those children. So good, bad, or otherwise.
Yeah. Cool. So I think one of the things too is that consistency. So how does consistency play a role in helping children to help feel safe or help deal with whatever they're going through?
So consistency is so important. So when we look at attachment theories, and I know we'll talk about this a little bit later, but as adults, we see attachment theories and how our attachments were as children carry into adulthood. And so when children have secure attachments to adults, then they perform better in school. They are able to self-regulate better. They have healthier relationships with other children and adults. Future success is usually anticipated for children with good attachment styles. Then there's this ambivalent or inconsistent attachment. And that is where a caregiver or a parent will sometimes be loving and invested, and then sometimes they're not. They're unpredictable. To me, in my experience, that is the hardest attachment style for a child. Because if a child can predict that their caregiver or parent will meet their needs, awesome. If a child's needs are not being met consistently, then the child knows they can't trust that caregiver or parent. When you have that unpredictable, inconsistent attachment, it is so difficult on children. That's where we see a really high rise in anxiety. So consistency is important because the child, when they can anticipate that their needs will be met, it's just such a much better experience, a much more regulated system, regulated child. So, when I think back in my childhood, and I had a guidance counselor. So she was our guidance counselor when I was in the 3rd through 5th grade, and her name was Toddy McGuire. And she was she worked, I think, with all the elementary school kids, and she had these things called warm fuzzies. And what they were is, as an adult, I'm like, okay, it's just a packet of like the colored cotton ball kind of, thing.
Yeah.
So, but as a child, it was almost like they were magic. And so when you received a warm fuzzy, it was because you had done something kind. You had, whether it was kind to the teacher, kind to your classmates, you're having a good day. And those warm fuzzies were coveted by all the children. And even though, again, as an adult, it seems a little trivial, as a child, that was a big deal. And so she just provided that presence and that support to children, especially if they were coming from maybe a home where it is very inconsistent, unregulated, can't predict the parent's behavior, the parent's support. But coming to school, you had Miss McGuire with her warm fuzzies. So it's just an example of that consistency and being there and showing up. So
Yeah, man, yeah, that is something about consistency. It is like so it almost sets off like a need trigger if something's not consistent, not there, I guess, huh?
Yes, absolutely. And if you think about it too, as an adult, we see that in our relationships with partners as well as with friends. If you think about a friend that says, yeah, let's make plans, and then they dip out last minute or they ghost you. I think that's a perfect example of that unpredictability. And those are difficult friends to have, the ones you can't predict if they're going to follow through with plans or anything like that. So when we look at it from adult perspective as well, you can kind of, if you're having a hard time understanding why that would impact a child, think about it now with your own relationships and go, oh yeah, so-and-so, I can't trust him. I get anxious when making plans with that person because they're just not going to show up. Or if you have a partner, a romantic partner that's kind of wishy-washy on things. So imagine having that anxiety with that person you should trust and want to spend time with, but you're relying on them 24/7 because you're a child and that's the adult that you're supposed to be relying on. So
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. Is there anything that you think educators may overlook or underestimate that could make a huge difference for a child in some like category?
yeah, I think that it's easy, especially if you've worked many years with children. So I work with college students. They're not children anymore, but sometimes, when I find out they were born in the 2000s, I'm like, how are you old enough to be getting a master's degree? There's no way. You're still a baby, But they're still in those formative years. They're still, a lot of them are under 25. So they say, our brain, our frontal lobe is not done growing until we turn 25. So when teachers work with students, it's easy to it's part of what you do. It's easy, it's routine. you're making a difference. It's also easy to just feel like some days you're not, or just maybe feel like you're not doing enough. But those small, especially when we're little, those core memories stick with us, good, bad, or otherwise. And so like using Toddy McGuire, my guidance counselor, as an example, is that she just came to work. She did what she was passionate about. She knew the warm fuzzies made the kids happy, and she just kept doing it. And I remember that now. That's 20 plus years later, and that still sticks with me today. And I'm going to make sure when this is out that I reach out to her and know that she's getting a shout out 20 years later. So it's just the little things. And I think what we have to remember is, as adults, the world is so big. We're so much more aware of things going on. For kids, their world is very small, especially little ones. And so little events that might seem trivial for us are a big deal to them. So on the opposite side of things, if a child is really attached to a toy, a teddy bear, a blanket, if they lose that item, that's a big deal. So as an adult, you're like, well, it's just a teddy bear, but they may have some type of attachment or something to that small item that is very important to them. So it's just the teachers, educators they can be that person. So when we talk about positive childhood experiences, one of the 7, because there's many ways that people document like positive childhood experiences and what those are. But one of them is children having 2 non-parental adults in their lives. So when those positive childhood experiences are fostered, knowing that you can be one of those. And so positive childhood experiences combat the negative things like adverse childhood experiences. And those PCEs or PACEs will outweigh ACEs every time. And a child will do better when they have more support and resiliency than those that maybe are in the same situation with a high ACE score, but they have less support.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So this, I think, segues really good into what we just talked about.
Right.
Just about the inner child as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Our educators, they're caring for children,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm sure there's a lot of adults, even me, who carry stuff that we got from our childhood that are still wounds today and that we still struggle with. And so I guess for an educator, like, why is it good for them to be able to, I guess, first, like, acknowledge that they have this like wound or whatever from the past, and why is it good to acknowledge it and then try to deal with it?
Absolutely. So we all have an inner child. Sometimes we want to say, no, I'm all grown up. I'm not a child anymore, but there is that piece of us. And so the inner child, whether there's some baggage or some damage that they've carried, that your inner child has carried, that'll always go with you. So sometimes people go into the helping professions or go into the education profession as an attempt to heal their inner child. They're like, I'm going to be the adult that I did not have as a child. So something that's really important, and I'm sure many people listening to this will think about compassion fatigue or burnout, because if you see this as being a way to help heal your inner child because you're going to help be the caregiver or positive support that you didn't have, then you can quickly become burned out. And so acknowledging your inner child, knowing that there's some hurt maybe that you're still carrying, is really important, because once you can come to peace with what you went through and what you dealt with, you can be that caregiver, be that educator without putting too much of yourself in it. So they say you can't pour from an empty cup. And I will say, trying to reflect on what happened to you as a child, inner child, any kind of experiences you had, that is hard. And it's hard to let yourself feel vulnerable like that. But it's very important to deal with what you're carrying, so that when you're working with children, you can be present and give your all without burning out. So,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's see. So what would you say that looks like for like the everyday life of an educator? Like, what can they do, like, on the regular to kind of deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't think of any books off the top of my head that deal with inner child, but I know there's like podcast books. There's all kinds of stuff out there about healing your inner child. But at the core, when you just look at it simply, I think when we can find quiet moments, which can be really hard, especially if you're an educator and a parent and all the other responsibilities, but finding a space to just sit with yourself. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to sit in quiet. It's hard to want to be alone with your thoughts. People joke about that. I don't want to hear, I don't want to listen to the voices in my head. I don't want to listen to my inner thoughts. I don't want to deal with it. But I think it starts with just sitting and acknowledging. And I think there's healing that can come from that. But also seeking professional support, professional help. If you start digging deep just on your own and go, oh, okay, this is beyond what I can handle on my own. So that's what I would recommend. And also peer support. So talking to other educators or parents or, anyone like a principal, guidance counselor, folks that you work with, because there's a potential that they've gone through similar things or, maybe have had to deal with it too. You don't become an educator or you don't decide to work with children unless you like children, or at least I hope that's the case.
Yeah,
you don't
right.
go into it thinking I'm doing this just for the money because we don't do that. We're passionate about working with children. So there might be some lived experience that's similar and shared. And so being able to talk to others and kind of process it. So, yeah.
Right. Cool. So how can like unresolved childhood experiences kind of creep up and show its way back into adulthood, and especially like in the caregiving roles? Like, are there any signs where they can notice like, oh, this is happening? It's from this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So something I touched on a little bit is adverse childhood experiences. We also just call it by the acronym ACEs. It was started. I believe it was in the early 90s that the research started coming out about ACEs. And it was identifying that even things that happen to us in our childhood, there's biology changes. So there's something called epigenetics where trauma can impact your body to where genes that have recessive traits flip and become dominant. So maybe there's not a family history of depression, but you experienced some traumatic things as a child, and now you now carry the active gene for depression. There's research on the Irish potato famine back in I believe it was the 1800s, and something else that's identified too is physical health ailments. So not even just mental health. So people with have experienced significant trauma as children are more likely to have heart disease, diabetes, die earlier, have teen pregnancy. There's 700% more likely to overconsume alcohol. So there's not just the mental health factors, but the physical factors as well, but also the lifestyle factors. And so what happens to children, especially if they experience a lot of trauma, carries over in more than just like the mental health side. And I think that's just something that's so sobering about knowing that your physical health is impacted as well. And then when we get to adulthood, if we don't face those, or if we have that unresolved trauma, which we may carry and not realize we're carrying it, then that's just going to compound. And so I think that's when we talk about how important it is to process that and recognize and seek support in it, is that if we don't resolve it, we do have these things that can creep up and happen to us physically. So
okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. I thought we mentioned this a little bit, but is there like another like one small like non-intimidating first step someone can take towards like being able to heal from stuff like that?
Yeah. So I'll put a little plug in for our program, the Tennessee ACEs program at Metro Drug Coalition. We are a team that offers education on ACEs and positive childhood experiences, but also trauma-informed care, resiliency, skill building. What we can bring to the table is if you just want to be able to talk to someone who's got this, the background in trauma-informed care, just say, hey, I'm feeling something and I don't really know who to talk to. We're a great place to start. Our services are free. We serve 16 East Tennessee counties. There's oftentimes we've worked with folks who come in and they just want to spill their heart out for 3 hours, and we provide that active listening And then they go, all right, I feel good now. And they leave and we don't hear from them again. And that's okay. So I think the first step would be like a peer support or someone that's a professional support to just get that first step. I worked with a mom who has 2 small children and is leaving an abusive marriage. And she said that I felt like I'm being financially abused and emotionally abused, but I'm isolated at home. And my husband's telling me, no, you're not being abused. I treat you great. Look, there's food on the table. You have a nice car to drive. And then her only other supports was his family, who also lives in town. And his family saying, you're not being abused. All your needs are being met. None of your bills have fallen behind. You have a roof over your head. And until she reached out, and she actually spoke with the Family Justice Center first and said, hey, these things are happening. I'm being told I'm not being abused because he's not physically harming me, and then they were able to validate and say, oh no, that is financial abuse and manipulation. That is emotional abuse and manipulation. And it was so validating for her to hear that. So even starting just talking to a professional or like another, a coworker or a friend and saying, hey, these things are going on. What do you think? So I think one of the worst things humans can do, and this is across the lifespan, is isolation, because we need people. We need our community. Even if our circle is small, we need others. So
yeah, I bet that skyrocketed too since 2020, the isolation, because I feel like now there's this sense that people want to be isolated, but then we also don't.
Right.
They don't get too close to me,
Yeah. So I definitely think we're seeing the effects of that still. I think it can be easier to isolate, absolutely, especially if you have any kind of anxiety or there's like this task paralysis that you can experience. And task paralysis is where there's things you need to get done. And because your list is long, it's like you just freeze. And it's hard. I experience that often. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yep. It's relatable, right?
Yep. So relatable.
And so it is a lot easier to just kind of shut those tasks away and just isolate than it is to say, okay, I'm going to get up. I'm going to get out of the house today. I'm going to run some errands. I'm going to have coffee with that friend I said for the last 3 months I'm going to have coffee with, things like that. So I will say, just from personal experience with task paralysis, for me, I find that putting on my noise canceling headphones and listening to an audiobook kind of puts me into this little space where all the extra noise, all the chaos around me is just quieted, and I get so much stuff done. So that's my trick. An audiobook with noise canceling headphones specifically.
Yeah. Great. Mm-hmm. Cool. So let's shift gears a little bit to community support and resources. Let's see. Community support, I think, is so crucial. Mm-hmm. But why would you say that? Would you say it is important? But and also, why would you say if so, it's important for like caregivers, moms, people like that, to have that kind of community support around them?
Yeah, absolutely. So biologically, as humans, and if you look at the animal kingdom, other mammals, there's that community that's needed, and we're just biologically wired to be around other humans. Now, with our culture and with the digital era, it looks different because some people's community is all online. But that interpersonal connection is so huge. And like you were mentioning with COVID earlier, that especially the opportunity to be in open spaces it was gone for a while, and it slowly came back, and sometimes it just didn't recover. So being around other people, there's also something, I heard this phrase and I love it. It's called body doubling. What that means is if you're experiencing task paralysis, or if you're just feeling down in the dumps, and socializing seems like too much, like I don't want to leave the house, I don't want to go out in public. If a friend comes over and just sits next to you on the couch, you may not interact a whole lot. You may not talk. You just might watch a movie together, but it's silent. There is something about that connection. So something as simple as just existing with other people, especially if it's a friend or a family member, just existing with other people does something to us, and in a good way. So
yeah, it makes me think of you ever watched like the TV show Alone?
Yeah.
It makes me think of that show where a lot of times people on there, they just go mad because they're by themselves for so long. Like you said, I think we are designed to be together, and so for being a caregiver where you're working with children the whole time, or a mom where you're constantly by yourself with the kids, whatever. I can definitely see how mentally it can take a toll on you. So having that community is huge.
Absolutely. So my sister's a mom of 3, and she's a stay-at-home mom. And we're very fortunate that my whole family lives on the same street. And, as kind of a joke, but she's also serious. She'll text the family group chat and say, come get your kids. Because sometimes she just needs a moment, because they range from the ages of 8 months and 6 years old. And so different varying needs too. The older children are a little bit more independent, but the baby needs you. But if the baby needs you and one of your other children needs you too, that's a lot, and you're being pulled in a lot of directions. And so it's an example of community, even in my own family, where when my sister's overwhelmed or she just needs a moment to herself, then she's saying, come get your kids.
Yeah.
So
that's all right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So before this, we mentioned you mentioned a website. I think positiveexperience.org.
Yes.
So can you share a bit about what that is and how it helps support people in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to pull up my notes because hope. So it's positiveexperience.org. It's a website, but what the program is called HOPE, which stands for Healthy Outcomes from Positive Experiences. I'm pulling up my notes because when I tell you the resources on there are endless, it's so many. One of the things I love is it's not just in English, but also in Spanish, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, Vietnamese, and Mandarin. And so if you're working with children where English is a second language, or if the parents don't speak any English, there's resources on there that can translate on their own. So those resources, because when I say that like endless, I mean, when you go to the tab of like filtering for topics, it's from educators to healthcare, to in the home and like how to create like a hope informed home. So they use something called the 4 building blocks of hope. So this is like the framework that it centers around. So it's formulating and fostering those positive childhood experiences. And so the 4 building blocks are building relationships within our family and with other children and adults through interpersonal activities, an environment that is safe, equitable, and it's safe for living, playing, and learning at home and in school, social and civic engagement to develop a sense of belonging and connectedness, emotional growth through playing and interacting with peers for self-awareness and self-regulation. So that's that foundation there. But there's games that you can use to play with your children. There's posters you can put up in your classroom that talk about how to have like a hope-informed classroom. And there was a resource I found, and I was going to just reference it if I still have it pulled up. I believe I do. And it was talking about like chaos in the classroom. And worst case scenario, I'll make sure you have access to it and can share it, because I may have lost it. But it was just kind of a checklist that in the heat of the moment, if a child is just losing their mind, like something's going down, they're crying, they're inconsolable, it's some tips and things to think about in something we had talked about, which is like centering yourself and grounding yourself, taking that breath, and then meeting the child where they're at. And then just kind of some things to think about when you're working with the child. So there's a lot of great resources on there. And also another shameless plug about our program is that we offer something called Hope 101 trainings. And so it gives that foundational hope framework for folks, and we can tailor it to the audience. So if there's a group of teachers that say, hey, we would love a hope training, and we are elementary school teachers or we're high school teachers, if any K through 12, even college, working with college students, we can come out and provide a educator specific hope training. If you're a medical professional, like a nurse, doctor, or if you work in the medical setting, you say, hey, I'd love to know more about like the hope framework when working in the medical setting, we can offer that. So
okay, that's great. Awesome.
And we can do it virtual, which I know can help for a lot of folks. Again, talking about busy, we're all staying busy, that we can offer it virtually too. So
cool. Yeah. See, is there any other resources or anything you wanted to mention at all or anything?
So I don't know of anything specifically off the top of my head. My biggest encouragement for educators is to lean on your coworkers because you can come home after a hard day and tell your family like you won't believe what happened today. And if they are not also an educator, they may not get it. They're like, oh man, that does sound like a bummer. But if you go to another educator and you're like, hey, I just need to process this for a moment, then that educator can say, all right, I got you, and be able to meet you at a level that other educators might not be able to. So I really encourage starting with your community, like that community level, that personal level. And then I also encourage folks to seek professional help. So if you find that it's really becoming too much, that like receiving some type of therapeutic service would help, highly recommend that. But what not to do is be isolated. So, kind of going through this alone and not seeking support, whether it's informal or formal, isolation is the worst thing that we can do because it just doesn't get better with isolation. So, but I always recommend peer support. So I'm a social worker and most of my career has actually been in the medical field. So even when I talk to social workers that have not worked in the medical field and I just talk about some of the struggles, they don't always get it either, just because, again, that experience they've not had, they don't know. And so I just think it's important to find, people in your circle that are maybe have done some of the same things that you have. Or if you also another one, especially if you're a young educator, is finding a mentor. So see if you can find an educator that's been in the field for 20 years and just say, hey, I've got this going on. What do you think? Because I think there's a lot of wisdom that can come from educators that have been in the field for decades. So, yeah.
Awesome. That's really good. See, is there any other like message or anything you want to give an educator? But I know you're already getting a few, so you don't. It's totally fine. But if you have any other message that you want them to know or you feel free to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I encourage folks, like my message is that you're doing the work that is hard, but it is so necessary. It's so needed because children do sometimes have good homes. Sometimes they have great family support, great community support, and sometimes they just don't. And teachers can step in and be that positive role model. They can be that piece that's missing. And I think if you talk to a lot of now grown up children, adults, I'm sure a lot look back and think of a coach or a teacher, an aunt, an uncle, grandparent, maybe someone that's not directly caring for them, but is in their circle that made a huge difference in their lives. So my encouragement is also self-care, like make sure to take care of yourself. I know we throw around the word self-care a lot, especially social workers. That's kind of one of our things. But taking time for yourself, even if it's just a little bit of just sitting in the car before you go in, after work and just take some time for yourself. So make sure to take care of yourself. And then also just pat yourself on the back. You're doing a lot and really influencing the next generation. So I give a lot of credit to teachers. Working with college students, my classrooms are very small, like 9 to 13. Elementary school, 15, 20, 25. That's a lot of kids. And they're in that formative years. And I'm learning more and more about developmental stages. And sometimes those middle schoolers are tough. They're savage. They just throw some stuff at teachers and adults. And you're like, gosh, that actually kind of hurt a little bit.
Yeah.
So all of that is to say is just thank you so much for what, I just really appreciate educators. And then just like, it's important to take care of ourselves. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I think you mentioned earlier, but one more time, if they wanted to reach out to you or to you guys, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So our website is now up and I'm very excited about it. The best way to find our website is to just Google Metro Drug Coalition and you can put in ACES, ACES, because our website's longer than it is easier for me to spell it out on the podcast here. So if you look up Metro Drug Coalition, ACES, it should pull right up to our website. And then it'll talk more about our services that we provide, the way to get a hold of us. So my last name is Clotfelter, and so I'll spell it out. Sometimes it makes it through. My email address is aclotfelter@metrodrug.org. So that's one way to just directly get a hold of me. So
okay, awesome. Yeah. We'll be sure to put the website in the description too. So if you've seen this, you should be able to see in the description and you can click on it there too.
Perfect. Yeah.
But yeah. Is there anything else you want to mention? Any last comments or anything before we sign off?
I don't think so. I really appreciate you having me out. I love talking about, things we can do to foster hope and resiliency in the next generation. So
yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for watching this episode. Be sure to stay tuned for the next one. And like I said, be sure to check out the website and you can maybe contact Ashley if you're interested. And also, too, we have a conference coming up in August. That could be a great time for you as well to be able to come out with other educators and make a community of your own. So you can do, like we said, just have people around where you can just engage together and have people to really who really know the struggle and can relate. So be sure to come out, retreat, get training hours, and it'll be a great time. But y'all, thank you so much for watching this podcast, and we'll see you guys later. Have a good one.